This entitled mother thinks she deserves the best seat in the house, even at someone's funeral. How will the other attendees respond to this crazy demand? Happy birthday if today's your birthday, and on with the revamped show. I remember this super vividly. Lots of tears were shed this day, as my family had lost our matriarch, my great-grandmother of 104. The family was torn to shreds last weekend, so nonsense like this wasn't expected. A bit of backstory. My dad's family is full of many different ethnic groups. My aunts and uncles live all over the world, so they've married accordingly. However, this EM and DK, about in their mid-40s and late teens respectively, figured their emotions were more important than that of my own. I've always been close to my grandparents on my dad's side, and that hasn't changed. Even when my mum, 52, and dad, 61, divorced, and I moved to Texas. Setting of the story is my hometown in Wichita, Kansas. We've gone through a ton of losses since I was little. My great-grandmother as of late, her daughter, my dad's mother, and my gramps, who I wasn't old enough to remember. I've had my fair share of funerals, and if it wasn't seen as disrespectful, I would much rather mourn in secret. Yet, every funeral I've gone to, my father has always saved me a seat in the front pews near him, so that I'm not lost in the sea that is dad's side of the family. Mostly also, since I usually call myself being a soldier, when he finally breaks down, it helps that I'm there to comfort him. Last funeral, his mum's, was the worst of these. He didn't even want to go back to his resident state, but instead wanted to live in their old house with his little sister, my aunt, for the rest of his days, because that's where she last was. Needless to say, knowing his parents and now grandparents were both gone, he was sputtering and bawling and just would not stop. That's jumping a bit too far, so let's take it back when everyone was filling into the chapel. I, naturally, took my spot next to my father in the first row of pews, preparing for tons of tears. I was taking a moment to myself to breathe, calming myself down. I was getting anxious and was about to have an anxiety attack, when EM, EK, and begrudgingly, nice dad, one of my married-in uncles, walk up to me. I stand to give them a hug and some blessings as normal, then go to sit down. Suddenly though, EM grabs my arm and holds me in suspension. Her nails are cutting into me a bit, but I don't say very much about it. I was an adventurous kid. A few scrapes and bruises never hurt, so her cat claws for darn sure weren't going to do a thing.
Excuse me, where do you think you're going? Indirect family sits towards the back.
I was appalled. Multiple scenarios of me hanging about my great-grandmother's, from now on as Big Granny, house and playing with Legos until my dad came home from work filling my mind. I clear my throat. This was helping none with my anxiety attack, by the way. Sorry, I don't think I understand. I'm Big Granny's first generation of great-grandbabies. This is my seat. Same as my dad, her grandbaby, is reserved this seat.
I don't see your name on it, kid. Move out the way. Don't you know to respect your elders?
I was stammering an anxious rebuttal. Acting like this doesn't make you any more of an elder as it makes me. You don't see me telling Big Granny's great-great-great-grandchildren not to chew gum or play on their mum and dad's phones instead, do you? EM, baffled by my talking back, trying her best not to raise her voice.
I've known Big Granny for years. You've never been around. There's nowhere a spawn like you was reserved a seat here. I doubt she even remembered you.
I'm nearly to tears at this point. Not only did she insult me, but she tried to tack on some guilt to make me feel even worse for having to live with my mother under custody. My mum didn't even want to come to the funeral. I look over and they're carrying Big Granny in, preparing to start. I begin to whisper, fighting the tears of confrontation, as well as seeing Big Granny's coffin. I'm sure that Granny wouldn't want somebody calling her great-grandchild something like that. It's time to be respectful. EK butts in, trying to put on her own 2 cents.
She's right, you know. Big Granny loved me more because I was around. We deserve to see her first. Now move, jerk.
EM in classic black mum fashion gives the back of her head a small smack.
Hush up, stay out of grown folks' conversation.
Turning back to me.
But she's right. We've been around more, so these are our seats. Move it.
My dad, turning from his wife to tune in, stands up, his light-skinned face turning beet red in anger. He looked as if he was going to pop his eyeballs out. Nice, Dad. Take your wife to the back. Big Granny is here. There's no time to be disrespectful.
Excuse me? I have as much right to be here with EK to honor our great-grandmother as much as she—
My dad was having none of it. Get out.
What?
Leave the chapel. Go away. You're bringing negative energy to a serious situation. Leave, now. His outburst brought a ton of attention. I was nearly to tears, and it wasn't even because they'd opened her casket for viewing. EM, EK, and ND start to walk out. EM and EK are beet red and bawling. I grab ND and shake my head. You deserve to see her. You weren't part of this. That's nice. I've been trying to turn her out for a while now. Lawyer said to be cordial and all. My dad smiled knowingly. You better hope you get EK and train her right. It seems her mother isn't there for her. Rather just to flaunt relevance over everyone else. It's not the way to go. Come, sit. Let's scoot over. I oblige and everything goes as normal. The funeral service was amazing. It wasn't depressing. The pastor made some nice points, some good laughs, and brought back some really fond memories. One thing from the funeral I was told to repeat for anything in the future: let not your heart be troubled. Yikes, imagine going to a funeral of somebody that you cared about. Maybe you weren't the closest with them all of your life, and there are these other family members that actually think they're more entitled to mourn closer up the front than you are. Now what they said might have even been true, maybe they were there for her more often. But here's the thing, if you really cared that much, why weren't you there at the funeral earlier to get the seats? And if they weren't reserved for you, then obviously they mustn't have been that important to you. Not as important as you think, at least. I had a run-in with an entitled middle-aged mother on my afternoon bus commute, returning home from high school. What ensued was the most unnecessary rant by a person in the history of the universe. Ever, probably. Let us set the scene. In true Australian fashion, Mother Nature gifted us with a 36°C day right in the middle of November. 100 degrees Fahrenheit for all you Americans. I've just gotten off my first bus to transfer, but unfortunately the next one doesn't arrive for another 30 minutes. Now this bus stop is horrible. It has a covered bench seat for 2 people, 3 if you're lucky, and standing room for 2 beside it. But again, unfortunately, due to the Earth's rotation and all that BS, the sun is glaring directly into the covered part of the shelter. This means 0 shade for the seat. This means the only shade of this relatively major bus stop is behind it. To add, I'm the whitest person you could ever meet. As ginger as they come with the palest skin you are ever likely to come across. My family's heritage is a mixture of Northern English, Scottish, and Welsh. Living in Australia, you can imagine what this is a recipe for. If you can't imagine what this is a recipe for, it is sunburn. Lots of freaking sunburn. Enter the entitled mother of this cautionary tale. Another bus arrives at the stop and drops off another 4 people. 2 high school kids, who saw that there was no room in the shade, so sucked it up and stood in the sun. And our entitled mother, who henceforth shall be referred to as Karen for consistency's sake, with her toddler in a stroller. This stroller had a sunshade, which I'm sure the toddler greatly appreciated on a day like this. Unluckily for me, Karen did no such sucking up and stood there in her stupid wide brim hat and fly-inspired sunglasses, eyeing up the poor souls who dare stand in the spot she was most rightfully entitled to. Of these poor souls, there was an elderly couple, 2 primary, elementary, schoolgirls and myself. You kid, move now! Sorry? I said move! Are you deaf, you stupid brat? Taken aback from the aggression from this woman, why? Why do you think? I don't want me and my baby getting burned! Are you that thick in the head? Me with great confusion, still unable to conjure up anything longer than a one-word answer. No? Karen summoned her inner toddler's whines. But I don't want to ruin my perfect skin! At this point, everyone is just stunned in disbelief at the immaturity of this 50-something-year-old looking mother. There, in a long silence which only seemed to tick Karen off more, she began to go redder and redder. Then she yells at me. Move, you stupid freaking kid! I have a child with me! It's my right to stand in the shade! I am way more important than you, stupid hooligan! How the frick can you be so rude to your elders, you little crap? Keep in mind, present are 2 children and her toddler, none of which were prepared to waste any of our brain cells trying to argue with this absolute doorknob. So we just watched her like an exotic animal at the zoo, amazed at how this majestic creature could somehow come from the same freaking planet as the rest of us. Karen gestures towards the elderly people looking for some sympathy.
Can you believe how rude this child is? Didn't their parents ever tell them to respect their elders?
Projectile spit came with the emphasis on, apparently, the golden rule of existence. They were having none of her bullcrap. The elderly woman of the couple called her out of the aforementioned bullcrap.
Are you kidding me? You have a giant hat and sunglasses, and your stroller has a sunshade. Stop moaning and just wait like the rest of us.
Now this happens over the span of maybe 3 minutes. In all the commotion, what pulls into the bus stop but this woman's bus? This World War III scale conflict was over 3 minutes in the shade. She turns to head to the bus, yelling back at us.
Expect to see a fine in the mail, you selfish jerks. My husband is a policeman, you know. I'll tell him all about what you did to me.
Get a grip, lady, yells one of the high school kids as she walks onto the bus. She parts ways with us with a complimentary middle finger and a feeling of confusion on our end. So that was my Monday. Why is it never an entitled parent's first choice to maybe use a little bit of politeness? Instead of just yelling, "You kid, move now." Nobody wants to be spoken to like that. I don't think she would either. Most Australians are pretty friendly and easygoing. If you just asked nicely, they probably actually would have moved. I could write a book on the entitled parents we deal with. School bus BS could be its own subreddit. Here's a few short good ones. Parent approaches bus in the morning as student is getting on.
My daughter is crying every night getting off the bus because her seatmate and her aren't getting along.
So I allow the student's second grade girl to sit with whomever she wants. She says she is happy with the new seat girl, no issue that evening. Next day, parent returns, irritated, says daughter was crying again and that I'm no good at assigning seats. She says she is calling the school. I told her that I let her daughter pick her seatmate and that she's sitting with the kid she picked and says she's happy. Haven't seen mum since then. She hides in the house and just sends the kid out. I had a high school girl's mum call the transportation center to complain that I didn't go 5 minutes off route to drop her daughter off at the driveway instead of her bus stop in the afternoon. Said it was dangerous to allow a 16-year-old to walk home in the rain wearing 4-inch heels. I agree, but I had 80 students to drop off in 35 minutes. Why in hell's bells was she wearing 4-inch heels to school on a Tuesday in April? This one's not necessarily entitled, but I subbed for a driver for a week who drove a Thomas C2 bus, not my usual bus, which has very unique small LED taillights. A parent at the Catholic school I dropped off at ranted at me for 10 minutes about being a Satanist. I was confused because she kept talking about the taillights and I didn't make the connection until the next morning pre-trip inspection. Google Thomas C2 school bus taillights and find a picture. Turns out the small round LED taillights look uncannily like pentagrams. Who knew? One parent sends another driver an updated schedule for her son's shared parenting 3 times a week, then calls and shouts when he gets put on the wrong bus by the school. We repeatedly tell her that it's her job to also tell the school about the changes, but she insists that it's our responsibility, even though we legally cannot call the school and change transportation arrangements. We tell her that too. She says we're racist. Her and her son are both Caucasian. A woman refuses to pay for the damages her son did to a seat because he's bored because the bus ride is so long. What do you expect? It's a 20-minute ride. Her son is 13 and in the 8th grade. And now for my favorite of all time. We had a parent at an apartment complex who would frequently not be at the stop when the bus dropped off in the afternoon. District policy requires a parent to meet each pre-K to 3 student at the stop if it's an apartment complex. Rule exists due to past issues with predators. When called by the trans center dispatcher, her voicemail was not set up. Multiple calls never yielded an answer, and text messages were ignored or left on read. She refused to give written permission for a neighbor to get her 3 daughters, 4-year-old pre-K 1st and 3rd, off the bus, so the students would often have to be brought back to transportation after routes in the evening. Upon not receiving her students, she would call a neighbor to ask if the bus had dropped off yet. She would then call the police to report them missing, and the police would tell her to check with transportation and make sure they were dropped off. She would. Upon finding out that her daughters were at the transportation center, she'd flip out about us not contacting her and making her call the police. She'd threaten to sue, and when told we were trying to reach her, she'd swear at dispatchers on the phone. then come in and get her kids with neither thanks or apology. She did this no less than 6 times before being allegedly evicted for not paying her rent for months. Haven't seen or heard from her since, and hope her daughters are doing okay, as they were sweet girls. Please, for the love of dog, thank your school bus drivers. You cannot imagine the crap we have to put up with. Safety inspections, cleaning puke and pee, training after training after training. We're first blamed by parents, schools, you name it. We drive a 6-ton steel cage on wheels of other people's kids that everyone hates because they have to stop for it, and some don't, and we occasionally watch helpless as they get hit by a car. Most of us live paycheck to paycheck, and many are retirees or college kids. Nevertheless, most of us wouldn't dream of doing any other job. We get on the bus and drive. Come heck, high water, Karens, you name it. End rant. Just being a participant on public transport, you know how much crap they have to deal with. I mean, that's why public transport has such a bad reputation, is because sometimes the worst of people end up being on the bus, including Karens and entitled parents. If you're a bus driver, I guess at least you get to be paid to be there. Submit your story to be read on the channel at voiceyherestories@gmail.com and join our Voicey veteran community at r/VoiceyHere. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. Alright, Voicey veterans, I'll see you in the next one.